Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us again. This is your daily support call. Today is a special day for me. So today we have Kristen Lake with me. And Kristen, could you just take a moment and introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. So I am an NLP practitioner and coach. I also facilitate breathwork classes, which I can explain further if you want me to. Breathwork is basically just a deeper form of meditation. And I basically, where my alchemy happens is blending kind of the mind, body, spirit together and how we can access all those different parts, but harmonize them into one to allow us to access our full potential. I want, my whole shtick is I want everybody in this world to be able to access their highest potential so they can live up to their dreams and passions.
Awesome. So I also want to introduce you, if I may, just in what you mean to me.
Okay.
Yeah. As a business mentor, I believe in mentorship, not just in business, but in various areas of my life. I have fitness trainers, I have a nutritionist, I have a physiotherapist, like people that are part of my medical health and wellness team. And I'm very selective about who I take on as a mentor. Kristen has actually been my life coach. We've done some work together to help me work through some issues that I was going through, because we all have that baggage from this life, from past lives, from the womb. And she was one of those people that instantly resonated with me when we met. We became quick friends, deep friends, and we've maintained that friendship. And one of the few people that I can honestly say I can talk about anything without any fear of judgment whatsoever, whether it's a tabooed topic from the norm or whatever it is.
Which it usually is.
It usually is.
Yeah.
I just want to say I've had some of my best conversations with you. So I'm so grateful for having you in my life. And I have so much respect and admiration for you as a person. And even in the time we've known each other, for watching your transformation, not just as a person, also as a woman, as a mother, and as a business owner. I am so proud of you and so impressed by you and love being a part of your life. So to that end.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Heart hug.
So to that end, yesterday was Kristen's birthday. And Kristen was supposed to have a virtual party. Unfortunately, that party didn't happen. I was asking you where the link was, and then, for whatever reason, it didn't happen. So Kristen, if you could give me a moment.
Here we go.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kristen. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Thank you. Love that, Jackie.
Now let's get into it, because
right.
Today wasn't about just singing your praises, which there are many, but it was about really serving others, the people that are tuning in. I see some people already here, so thank you for joining us today. And also for those that are going to be watching on YouTube, we really appreciate you as well. And our mission is to hopefully be able to support you through these trying times. What am I talking about? I am talking about a world that has transitioned unexpectedly. Not just a few people, not just a city, but an entire world that is now reactive for their own health, reactive for their families, reactive for their businesses. We're being forced to stay home. And I don't want it to sound like doom and gloom or some, end of the world type of movie, but there's been a lot of fear in the world, and fear manifests itself in so many different ways. You and I were talking before, and I want to continue that conversation, that one of the things I've noticed early on, and it's changed since that conversation as things have been unfolding so quickly, is there's been two polarizing reactions to the fear. There's been people that have been doom and gloom, sky is falling, end of the world, hunker down, hoard your toilet paper,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And then there's the other side where people aren't taking it seriously enough. They're like, it's just a thing like anything else. Oh, yay, forced vacation, and we'll be back to work in 2 weeks. And one of the topics when we were talking about fear, and I loved this, and this is where I'd love us to start, is you actually identified it not simply as fear, What is grief?
Yeah.
About that.
Yeah. So people are grieving the loss of the life or the future that they thought they had. This is how I see it, at least, is that it's grieving even the old way of doing things. So, Marcus, you know how difficult sometimes it is for people to change, right? Now people have been forced into this change. You know, nobody has a choice to, other than, like, let's think of somebody who normally would do a desk job, a corporate desk job, and maybe they've never connected to Zoom before. That's going to force them outside of their comfort zone to do something different. So anyway, there's this grieving process. And I think that when you talk about where the people are at, it's just different stages of grief. So I told you that I could screen share the stages of grief, and we could kind of walk through that.
Absolutely.
Because it's cool to see a visual. Let me see if, can you, yeah, there we go.
If I can get you to do it. There you go. Okay. So
there.
You can
You
share.
you can see it, yeah?
It says you started sharing, but I see nothing yet. There it is. Perfect. Okay.
Hang on, let me see. Okay, so you'll see there. Can you see my face or no?
I can, yes, but
There. Okay.
I guess can currently.
Okay, so if you look at denial, so when grief happens, think about if a family member passes away, or the traditional grief that we know, we'll start with denial. Oh yeah, that's not really happening. So I think a lot of people are still in that denial phase. Like, even though we've been in this in Canada, in our area, for about 2 weeks now, people are still avoiding, they're confused, they're shocked, and they're in fear. Just not knowing. So the way that I've been using this example, and I might have done this with you, Marcus, is the example of the boy who cried wolf. So we've heard so many times, oh, a hurricane is coming and the hurricane doesn't come. Or, this disaster is coming, the natural disasters in the world, and then it doesn't happen. What I found myself going through was I denied this at first because I'd heard those stories so many times. And I think it's natural, right? I think it's natural for us to deny it. And also, we don't want to, like if you think too far in the future of, like, the what ifs, what could happen, then that's also scary, right? So there's this weird, okay, yeah, I don't really believe it's happening, but I see the news, but I don't know what to do. So those people are in denial. Then there becomes, like, anger, right? So frustration, irritation, anxiety. I actually believe that anybody that's not moving through these emotions right now, they are still in denial. So you're right in saying that there's those two camps happening, right? So here's the grief cycle, but the grief cycle, as you see, it goes like this. It's not a linear thing. So you can be in denial and be in anger and be back in denial within, a 2-minute span. You could even go down to bargaining. So bargaining, struggling to find meaning. So you hear a lot of the people like, oh yes, there's a deeper meaning for this. And I believe that also, but it's also part of that process. So I can actually say, looking at all of this, I've been on every part of this scale. I'm leaning into a little bit more of acceptance now. So when in the beginning it was like, okay, I'm going to deny this, and then there's my anger, there's my bargaining, there's my depression, and I was doing kind of like a kind of thing, but now I'm more on the up level of acceptance. And sure, like, I'll dip into the other ones, the anger, the depression, the bargaining, the denial, but I just don't stay there as long because I've learned how to process that and how to move through it. So I've seen with some of my clients in the past, clients that have stuck grief. So how stuck grief shows up is a lot of denial. It'll be like, oh yeah, like, that doesn't bother me anymore. But then underneath that, there's always a level of anxiety and anger, but they don't consciously connect that this is what's happening. So I'm all about offering the information and showing people, like, no, this is what's actually happening, because then once we connect, okay, I'm feeling denial, or I'm feeling anger, or I'm feeling depression. Once we connect that, then we can kind of know how to work through it. But if we're just kind of like running around, not knowing how we're feeling, not labeling it, then this makes it very difficult to move through.
Well, agreed. And I actually think there's two other things I'd like to touch on while you have this up. Is I liked how you talked about how there's that dip in the curve. This is that familiar J curve that you and I know about. And what I want to point out to people looking at this is that if you pay close attention, acceptance is actually higher than denial. Meaning that once you work through this grief cycle, you're actually better off at the end of it, right? The acceptance of it is actually the best place to be. You mentioned some of the reasons why we struggle, why we keep going back and forth through it. And you talked a lot about internal tools, the stories we're telling ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. And down below, it identifies, information, communication, emotional support, guidance, and direction. I was having a conversation even just today via Facebook. And one of the biggest challenges I've seen, whether you're the US, Canada, France, Italy, any of the countries of the world that are affected, which is pretty much all of them, the information and communication externally has also had a huge impact on the grief cycle, because we're getting different information in different parts of the world. We're getting different information on different days. And sure, there's a learning curve as we go, but I think a lot of people get stuck in confusion, which is part of denial, and anger as a cycle, because our leaders and our politicians are telling us different things each and every day. And sometimes those are layering on top of each other to support what was said the previous day, but other times they're almost exactly contrary. Like one day we're being told, yeah, you're okay to go out for a walk in the park as long as you stay 6 feet away from each other. Now you're like, no, everything's closed. You'll be fined $5,000 if you go outside. So it's frustrating for people. And I think that it may be contributing to us staying in the grief cycle as a society longer than we actually need to. So it's interesting that there is those internal influences as well as those.
Well, and what I also know is that, so this is from my own experience, and then also through other people that I've been talking to, it's not only just this we're going through. So people are forced to now, what I've been going through, because maybe just because I'm consciously aware of it, or maybe other people are too, I'm not sure, but there's other stuff coming up for me. So I'll be feeling anger, and I'm like, okay, am I feeling anger actually about what I think I'm feeling anger about? Like, is this really about the dishes, right? Like, let's say my husband didn't do the dishes, or like some example like that, right? Am I actually angry about that? Maybe. But like underneath that, maybe I'm feeling, some anger and fear towards the situation that's happening with COVID-19. But maybe underneath that, on an even like subconscious, unconscious level, maybe I'm feeling angry about something that happened years ago. But all of this change is just causing that to bubble up.
Well, and I think somewhere in between those as well, it might even be anger at the disruption of your normal routine, which is what we talked about before, where some of this grief comes from on some level, whether it's conscious, subconscious, unconscious, is people are being forced to adjust in every aspect of their life. It's not merely that, let me back up a step. You talked about, looking forward and all the possible what ifs, and there are professions that's part of what I do and what our team does is called risk management. And you're thinking of, catastrophic failure and recovery plans, like how do you recover from disasters? And you have to think about things like that. I've written scenarios for various companies here in Toronto where what if a meteor takes out the downtown core? What if all the electricity fails? What if we're abducted by aliens? What if we go to war? All these types of scenarios, and how do you get back into business quickly? And in some of those scenarios, for example, the meteor scenario, okay, people can, work from home, but at the same time, you're still going out, you can still be social, you can still interact with each other because only one thing has been taken away, and that's the geographic location. Or in another scenario, let's say we go to war scenario. Well, sure, that's going to affect things, but it's not going to affect everything. And I think part of the big challenge with this scenario, the pandemic scenario, which we're actually experiencing for the first time in our generation, anything this significant, is that it's affecting how we work. it's affecting how we live. It's affecting our physical health and where we can go to exercise. It's affecting our relationships with friends. And for some people, it's affecting faith because they can't congregate to share similar values and beliefs. So it's actually hitting almost every single area of our life at once. And to your original point, it's not something we wanted. And adjusting to one change significantly in life can be challenging.
Right.
We're having to adjust to all of it.
Yeah.
And somehow people are like, stay sane. It's going to be okay. So what are your thoughts around that type of thing?
So it's interesting. You know me, I'm like real. I'm straight up. That's just kind of the way I roll. I have been coming up with this thing lately about, so everybody's emotions are heightened right now, right? And you'll see it on Facebook, people posting things like, you know, heaven forbid you post something that could insinuate anything right now. Like people will get right into it, right? So what's happening is there's this level of like the anger and the irritation, right? So what I see happening right now is that a lot of people are in that fight or flight, like we talked about. They kind of just don't know where they're going, you know, what they're doing. And I also think that this shift in what's happened has really caused people to look at different areas of their life and really what's working and what's not working.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah. So especially for like those who have a hard time changing, right? Like you're saying, it's really bizarre. Like when you're used to walking up to somebody and hugging them, or like people don't even know what to do. Like let's say when I'm walking the dog and I'm walking across the street from somebody, there's this like, do I say hi? Do I not say hi? Like it's changed our social norms completely. And I was making this joke the other day about how, you know, if kids didn't have stranger danger before, like they definitely do now, right? Because it's like, it's so awkward.
Yeah, it is true.
Yeah. So anyway, going back to the fight or flight, I've noticed, so lately I've been studying a lot about the nervous system and how the nervous system works.
Okay.
And I was walking down the street with my dog, and I was walking by these two men, and they walked kind of like out of the property. So let's say I was on this side of the road. They were on like a property on this side of the road. They walked kind of to the edge of the property, and then all of a sudden turned around, like they looked at me, turned around and quickly walked the other way. And my body immediately went like, like, oh my gosh, what's happening, right? Like I went right into this fight or flight. And it's funny because I think because we're in this heightened sense of like emotion and awareness and whatever else is happening right now, that I was hyper aware of that. So right away I'm thinking, oh gosh, what's happening? I look over and all they were trying to do was like hold their dog back because they had a dog that wasn't on the leash. So they were actually, what I perceived to be a threat, they were actually doing a kind thing by just going and holding their dog back so their dog didn't charge at my dog or whatever, right?
And that's so powerful. I mean, we do that all the time in the best of times. So away from COVID for a moment, I mean, separating the fact from the story is such a critical part of the conversation we have within ourselves. And so often we don't even, like, something happens and we immediately sign a story and a judgment and a reaction and an emotional response, and it usually does not work well in our favor. So yeah, kudos to you for, in that type of situation, in a heightened state of volatility in society right now, being able to still separate, you know, a fact and not just being stuck on what your story was, but open to the idea of an alternate story, which might not have been so fearful. So kudos to you.
And what I learned from that too, or what I've been learning in the last little while, is that a lot of the time, let's say that, okay, so I had a perceived threat, the threat happened, and I felt it in my body. My heart was racing. I felt like I needed to walk faster. I think the old me, before learning all of this, would have just like, oh, it's fine, right? Oh, it's just a dog and it's fine. But what we actually need to do in those moments when we're feeling fear or we're feeling a certain way is we actually need to acknowledge the fact that we're feeling it, move through it. And just like what I actually had to do was once I got home, I had to just like take a couple breaths, recognize what happened. Like I was still feeling it 5 minutes later after I left. But what we tend to do is stuff it down, stuff it down, stuff it down.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's no right or wrong way of how to move through that, but the best way of actually moving through it is just to acknowledge it and allow that feeling to pass, even if that's 5 or 10 minutes later. We just don't want to initially stuff it down.
Right. And I agree with you on this one. We actually, even Jackie is saying thanks for bringing up that whole being angry at doing the dishes thing earlier. And it's very true what you're saying, because the human experience is all emotions. If we weren't meant to experience them all, the anger, the frustration, the guilt, the rage, like all of this stuff, the sadness even, we wouldn't be capable of doing so. And this is a much deeper conversation where we get into, the passed on morality from our parents of what right and wrong is for our lives, and then how our own experiences adjust that, but it's skewed to begin with. And so, yeah, being able to recognize that, wow, I am actually upset right now, even if you aren't entirely sure why, to not stuff it down and repress it for later, but to actually allow yourself to experience that emotion. It's perfectly okay. Right? It's okay in normal times, but you keep using this word heightened, and it's true. We are in a heightened state right now. We're more reactive to things for all the different reasons that are still showing on screen. We are more susceptible in many cases of overreacting to things. And that's okay too. The last thing you want to do is be super critical of yourself and deny yourself the opportunity to freely express your truth. And again, this even goes back to one of the first sections there about information and communication. Little subtle things. You and I believe in the power of words. And one of the biggest things I have not liked from the beginning is the label of social distancing. And when you were telling your story about how you're walking down the opposite side of the street and you saw these guys with a dog, and then they turned around and went, the story I immediately thought of was how it's like the zombie apocalypse. I saw another human being. Uh-oh, that's social. We need to distance socially. Run away. That was the story I told myself. And, in some ways, I think if we actually treated this like a zombie apocalypse, we might be a lot better off because it's a visible, tangible threat as opposed to an invisible killer. That's not my thought. That was straight from Trevor Noah on the Tonight or the Daily Show. He was basically talking about how, there might be a little bit of virus in the park across the street, but we don't know. It might be there, might be a little bit, might not. So we're willing to chance it because we can't see it. But if someone said to us, well, there might be 3 or 4 zombies lurking in the bushes in that park, you ain't going to the park.
Yeah, it's like a tangible zombie, right?
Right. So it's an interesting mindset because we can't see it, therefore it's not real yet. But at the same time, going back to that social distancing, I've been calling it physical distancing since the beginning. I've noticed, the Prime Minister, I'm not saying he got it from me, but a lot of people are changing the way they talk about it because we're actually being more social now, I believe, through virtual tools than we ever have in the past. So the physical distancing, that's really the big part, but it's actually the global community and the connectedness that is going to help us all get through this with that sanity intact, to allow ourselves to grieve together. Like it says it right here in the middle, emotional support, right? Yeah. These daily things I'm doing, I was talking about this with one of my clients this morning. They were admiring how I do this and how I'm serving my community, how I'm serving the public, serving the world. And I was like, thank you for that. I accept that. I welcome that. Thank you. It's also self-serving. It's self-serving because it's keeping me up to date on what's going on from people I trust with verifiable sources. I've had politicians on here. I've had the head of BNI on here, Ivan Meisner. I've had finance experts, bank representatives. I had all kinds of people on here that are giving me insights and perspectives relevant to me and my community that help me have a better understanding so I have less fear and can walk through the grief cycle, right? And at the same time, having people on here, this has given me some normalcy to structure. Now, I've always been pretty good with my structure, but having this on here has allowed me to have a set time, 12 to 1 every day that I can get on and catch up with somebody. Today it's you. And I'm loving it because, I mean, let's be honest, you and I, as much as we're really good friends, for whatever reasons, our lives have become very busy as we grow our businesses, as we pursue our purpose, and we don't get to connect like this very often. And when we do, it's in a group setting, much like this. But right now, I'm so thankful that there's people tuned in today. But even if there wasn't, we would likely be having the exact same conversation.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, and actually, I just want to touch on something that you were talking about the virus being unseen, right? And that whole, if there was zombies walking around, that is a physical thing that you can see. So how I equate that to even what we're talking about is, because people's emotions and mental health is not a tangible thing, it tends to get ignored. So when you look at, if there was something physically wrong with me, if my arm was broken, I would have to attend to that, right? It's physical and there's something happening there. Whereas with like looking at the chart with like the emotional support, a lot of the time people just brush it off, right? It's like, oh, that's just my emotions, or that's like, they don't even acknowledge that. That's just, oh, how I'm feeling, and don't realize that there's tools and solutions, and that we do need, like what you're talking about, the community and somebody that's trustworthy to be able to open up to and have those like authentic conversations, rather than, let's say I called somebody and I was like, hey, I'm feeling really fearful about this whole COVID thing. Like, what do you think? And they were like, oh, fear, what are you afraid about? Like, it's, more people are recovering than they are dying and all this other stuff. And they started to put that idea in my head. What they're doing is actually, like, the term that I use is gaslighting, right? They're telling me that my emotions aren't real. So what's important to me, and what I admire in you also, Marcus, is the ability for me to be able to say, this is how I'm feeling, and you're not going to deny that to me, right? So I think that everybody needs some sort of person in their life that is going to allow them to feel the emotions and hold space for them to have those difficult conversations, because I find that it's therapeutic even just speaking it out loud.
Agreed. Well, and now, so a couple of things there. I mean, there's so many parallels, because first of all, I've said this so many times, and there's a lot of people on this call right now that know me. They know the business mentoring programs I do. And one of the things we talk about is ask for help, right? As entrepreneurs, as business owners, there's this inherent belief that you should know everything you need to know. And that as a business owner, if you don't know it, then you're already a failure. And that is horrible self-talk. And it's the same, and where we get that from, right? Because if we've never been a business owner before, why would we have that belief? We have that belief because that's what we've been told our whole lives, right? That you should know better, that you should know how to do things on your own, that you should be able to sort it out.
Figure it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm no different. I mean, you've done work with me. We talked about that earlier for people that have joined together, and you're right. And I'm accepting that. Thank you for acknowledging me. I love that I am in a position in my life now as a human being where I wear my vulnerability as a strength. There is no boundaries. We talked about that ahead of time. We are in a place where you and I can talk about pretty much anything with mutual respect, because what we're doing is we're testing each other's ideas with respect. We're tentatively putting out our own ideas with the goal of getting to this pool of shared meaning, right? We want to learn from each other. I'm not about proving myself right to you.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of people, because they have that insecurity, because they haven't done that work, because they're not confident enough in themselves or have the tools to do so, that they do allow themselves to get gaslighted, as you said, or they bully their way through conversations. And full honest talk here, that was me for years. I lost some dear relationships, previous girlfriends, friendships, and whatever, because anytime someone was in a position where I felt that I was being invalidated, and this ties into that fact versus story, someone would say something, and immediately all of my past baggage would fire up, and I could feel my temperature rising, and I would interrupt and I would shut it down. And I would, because I made up a story about how I was not being validated to them. And in the process, I was actually minimizing them without ever expressing myself in a really meaningful, heartfelt way.
Yeah.
Right? So it's taken me a lot of work and a lot of years. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm still a work in progress.
Right.
Right? But
Yeah.
I'm always learning more, and I'm always seeking people like you. And interestingly enough, let's switch it over to a little bit more of that practical woo. The more I develop and the more I grow in my life, it almost feels as if the right people keep coming into my life. I keep attracting people to help me grow, and keep attracting people to help me learn in the areas I need to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what happens, right? Is that you only have the awareness that you have until you get something new and new resources, right? And this is why people stay stuck in their same lives all the time, is because they are being closed-minded and they're not looking for those new resources, or asking for help, or wanting to learn from somebody that might have a different perspective, or even just opening their mind to having those conversations. I just think about, if I were to do that, if I didn't open up and didn't have these conversations, then like I wouldn't even evolve as a human. And that to me is scary. The non-evolving is the scary part. Yeah.
Yeah, and see, that's interesting, because something my old self would say, like even 2 years ago, Marcus, back to what we were talking about with change, and you were saying how some are resistant to change. And I used to believe that everybody, I used to have a funny phrase for it. How did the phrase go? Oh yeah, yeah, we're all for change, just don't change me, right? And that's what I fully believed about people about 2
Yeah.
years ago, that none of us want change, that you would have to pull us along kicking and screaming until we had no choice but to accept. And that view has changed.
Right.
I'm with you. I love being challenged now. Never used to, but I love being challenged now. And I'm always learning every day. We have a mutual friend, and I quote him often, James Smith from HVAC Pro.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest quotes he ever shared, and I use it in lectures, I use it in seminars, is, it's really simple and succinct, and I love it. If you think you're done growing, either you're dead or your business is. Like, I love
Yeah.
it. It's to the point, no nonsense. If you think you're done growing, either you're dead or your business is. And
Wow.
that was such a wake up for me. And it was about 2 years ago that he told that to me. And that was, again, another trigger at the right time to help me progress in my own journey. And I think for me, let's kind of twist this a little bit. I think for me, transition to the next topic, because of the work that I've done, because of the business that I do. I mean, right now we're busier than ever. We're essentially in what's called triage mode, because all that stuff, that boy who cried wolf, you know me, I've been crying wolf for years, that people need to get systems in place. They need to be able to work remotely. They need to have this emotionally invested culture that's not dependent on a common physical space. I've been preaching it for years, and now suddenly anyone I've ever talked to is knocking down my door saying, how quickly can you transition us? And
Yeah.
I'm so fortunate and so blessed that my journey has allowed me to essentially call what's happened in the world business as usual for me. Like, we haven't really suffered a lot at all. In fact, the opposite. Business wise, the only things that have changed for me as a person, I mean, my wife works from home, so I'm used to her being here. I can work from home or anywhere. That's the whole premise of how we built How To Project. What's changed, of course, is I am the front-facing dude of the company. I'm the one out doing the sales. I'm the one out doing the live events, that interaction we talked about, the hugs, the high fives, the smiles, and I miss that. So the only place that's really changed for me is not going to the gym and not being able to get out of the house. Now, the gym part was easy. I downloaded a body weight workout, and between you and me, I think it's some of the most brutal stuff I've ever done is the calisthenics work.
Yeah.
And you know, again, we're fortunate. We have a rooftop patio. And the last week, it's been warm enough that when my wife needs to get away from me or I need to get away from her, up to the roof we go, right?
It's probably more of her trying to get away from you, though, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. It really has been. And even this, I mean, you might not notice, I actually switched it up for the first time today to a blank wall, but every recording previous to this was actually turned around, and you can see I'm in the living room. So we have a shared office, but spending, 8 to 10 hours together all day working, and then not being able to go anywhere. So the rest of the time, all day working, it just doesn't work for the dynamic that we share. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. My wife and I, when we got married, here was the agreement. There's my life, there's her life, and there's our life, right? That's always worked for us. Some people don't understand it. That's okay. So what's lacking right now in my life is that what we just talked about, that division. Right now, all we have is our life. There's no my life. There's no her life. So that's been the adjustment for us. How has it been for you? Let's talk about that. Let's get real on the Kristen end.
Yeah.
And tell me about it.
Okay, so it's funny when you were talking about, you know, life not really being all that different. And then also you've been preaching people get their businesses online and be remote and do those kind of things. One thing that I've had a thought about is now people are doing all the things that I've been preaching. So I used to homeschool my kids. Now, and you know, back when I did, so let's say 3 years ago, I guess that would have been 2-3 years ago. Everybody thought it was crazy. It was just this different way of living. And now everybody's had to kind of adapt to this. So it's like, there's part of me that kind of like laughs in the back of my head of like, oh yeah, told you so, and told you, you know, it can be done and whatever.
That's honest, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other piece of that is like, we've always grown our own food. So so I say we, when I'm referring to we, I mean myself and my husband, Adam, and our children are fairly resourceful also. Like we've been like, he keeps saying he's prepared his whole life for this, right? Because he's the one that likes to like grow the vegetables and he wants to live off the land and all of these different things. We've been researching and living and preparing for this for a very long time. So it's like, we're now we kind of, like, I would say we've gotten away from a couple things like taking those vegetables and preserving them and that kind of thing. We kind of got away from that as life gets busy and, you know, there's not a lot of time for stuff. But those are things we're starting to step back into. Like today, I'm starting to make my own sourdough starter and we're going to make sourdough bread, right? So we're just really all about that sustainability. So what I find that for us as a family, what we've really noticed is our values and what's actually important to us and what we weren't living up to our values about too. So one of my things I love is music and playing music. And I always tell people this example is like, it's like my guitar is this thing that I'm always like, oh, I'll do that when I have time. I'll do that when I have time. And now I'm like, although I technically shouldn't have more time right now, I think it's the talk of everybody saying like, oh yeah, we have all this time, that I'm now able to pick up my guitar and play it a little bit more and start my morning that way. And we're able to, you know, grow the vegetables. We've got this whole setup happening in the basement right now. Like, it's unreal. I should take a picture of it and send it to you.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. But yeah, like now we've really kind of honed in on like what's important and what's not important. And what do we actually want? Do I want to be, so one of our kids, she used to do competitive dance last year. And that's 4 or 5 nights out of the week, driving here, there, and everywhere. Throughout the winter, there's a dance competition every other weekend, driving there, staying in hotels, doing all that. And we're like the most non-busy family that you'll ever meet, but that was the thing that would like keep us all over the place. So to be able to just not even drive to that 3 nights out of the week, like she's not competing this year, so we've kind of scaled back on that a bit, and that in itself has been a relief. And then now the fact that we don't even have to do it at all, we're like, yay, yeah, time to make bread and time to grow vegetables. And we've really gotten back to who we actually are as a family, which is pretty cool.
That, I actually love that. There's a lot you said there to unpack, and I love it. So let's talk about that one, time.
Yeah.
Because again, something I've been preaching in business, and even something you touched on it. People are like, oh, now we have all this free time. And I don't believe, and I tell people this, feel free to challenge me. Like, you know, I love exploring ideas. I don't actually think it's that we have more time, because time is time. I think it's that we're actually wasting less time on things that don't have meaning.
Right.
And it's the efficiency. So like you said, we're getting back to who we are and whatever that means for you as an individual or family, but we have a lot less wasted time. And it's amazing some of the stories people have been sharing about, wow, I never realized how much time I wasted standing in lines or driving around in traffic or all of these things. And so it seems like a lot more time just because there's a lot more options of what to do with our time. So I applaud you and your family for, you know, doing the homeschooling and for exploring exploring, doing your own growing of vegetables and playing guitar and all of these different things. My wife and I, we are not good when it comes to plants and vegetables. Most of the plants in our house, literally all of them but 2 right now, are fake. And I think one of the fake ones is dying. That's how bad we are with plants. And we're like, if this is going to go on longer, and spoiler alert, we've just found out that it's going to go on longer. They're looking, what the experts now are saying is about 9 to 12 months conservatively that we could potentially be looking at this self-isolation. I'm not even talking recovery. Just on the side rant, I mean, Toronto has announced that 12 weeks mandatory, but beyond that, what the financial experts have been saying on this show this last week is that we can be expecting 9 to 12 months of some form of forced isolation, and then another year or 2 before things normalize. Not go back to normal, but normal.
They never will.
They never will. They can't
never will
go back. You can only go forward. We all learned that when we got the first time we got our hearts broken, right? And that ties back to grief. So we've been researching, what are the most foolproof vegetables to grow? So here's a tip. Yeah. Did you know that when you cut off a celery and that bottom piece that everyone throws out,
you can regrow it?
You can regrow it. You don't even need soil. You can just put it in a jar of water. So we've started growing our own vegetables. And I'll tell you, I will be doing a dance of joy when those first little sprouts start to come out, because I have never successfully grown anything. And I try and I learn and I test and I adjust and I research and somehow screw it up every time. So if I can have my own celery and cucumbers, I am a happy boy.
Well, and here's something people don't know too, is that you can freeze and preserve pretty much anything. We don't get into these practices because we're such a throwaway society, right? But there's so many things that, I'm gonna go even a step further here. We have chickens. So anything that we don't use, we compost, but compost is we give it to the chickens, and then the chickens eat it. And that's actually what makes their, the yolk, when you see those really orange yolks that are from like fresh, or what do you call them? Like free range chickens or whatever. That's because they have a variety of different things in their diet. They're not just eating grain.
Yeah, good to know.
Yeah. So it's all about like the cycle of bringing this back to using everything. Like when we look at the toilet paper situation, right? It's like, I'm not saying use less toilet paper, but maybe instead of using 5 squares, you only use 2. Like, let's get back to learning how to conserve things, right? And actually just not taking things for granted.
Well, or even, and I love this topic because even more so than that is cultural differences. So my wife is from Pakistan, and so her family is of a Muslim background. So for them, they don't understand the whole toilet paper hoarding thing, because for them, it's a soapy left hand, right? And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I'm not going to go out of my way to hoard toilet paper to pay, as demand increases and supply goes down, the price is going to skyrocket. And if it were to get to a point where, people are physically fighting over toilet paper, I'm just going to soap up that hand and go, because at the end of the day, there's more important things in my life than toilet paper. But it comes down to what you were saying, though, really interesting topic is, and again, even in normal life, hopefully this is one of the things we'll decide to keep, is becoming producers as opposed to consumers. That's business 101. You need to be a producer more than you're a consumer, and that's how you have a sustainable business model and a profitable business. So that's been the biggest shift right now that we've been seeing, is we've been so over consuming as a global community. Everybody consume, throw away. And now, like yourself and myself, we're struggling in some ways to figure out, how do we produce to survive? And then how can we produce something new, because the old is gone? So what can we transition to produce something of value to others, so that we can continue to buy the things that maybe we don't know how to produce? I don't know how to sew clothes. I don't know how to make clothes. There's so many things I don't know how to do. I don't even know how to cut my own hair. It's starting to get out of hand.
I know how to do that. I did mine the other day.
Right. Well, that's, again, it comes back to experiences. You were a hairstylist for many, many years. Who knew that would come in handy during the viral apocalypse? Right. So it's funny to see how it's not even going back. It's just a reset. And for whatever reason, some people are like, it's from God or it's from whatever the reason is behind this, even if it's just as simple as it seems, some Chinese kid eating a raw bat, whatever the reason. I think in many ways, this reset presents all kinds of opportunities, not just for individuals, but for the way we move forward together as a society.
Yeah, actually, so I had this post, actually, that one that you commented on about, how can people help and what do they have to offer, right? Like the whole bartering conversation. And it was interesting for me to see some of the responses on there, because I did expect people that have businesses to like kind of offer what they have in terms of a business. But I made a comment on there that I was like, oh, I could do dog walking. And I had a girl on there say like, oh, you do dog walking? And I'm like, anybody that's, able-bodied can walk a dog. I was just offering what my resources are. Like, I can grow food, I can cut somebody's lawn if I need to. These are things that, like, I'm not talking about necessarily things that will make me money or things that I want to start a business in. It was just like, how can I actually just help? So what I noticed from that post was completely different than what I thought was going to happen, was I realized how disconnected people are from the resources that they actually do have. So let's say sewing clothes, for example. I know how to sew clothes. Like, my mom is an awesome seamstress, made all of my Halloween costumes when I was a kid. I've made a couple Halloween costumes for my kids with my mom kind of beside me, helping me do it. If I need to know or learn that skill, I have a sewing machine and I have my mom as a resource to get on the phone. I have the internet, I can figure it out, right? So I think it's like, what people really need to do is, it's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of resourcefulness. And they need to just, we all need to tap into those areas that we haven't actually been using. Like, let's say growing your own vegetables. We're all capable of doing that. It's just a matter of getting out of the box that we've been living in. I don't care if you do IT and you only know how to work computers. Like, let's stretch our brains a little bit and find those creative ways of trying to be sustainable and help each other and come together as a community all at the same time, right? It doesn't need to be so in a box. And that's how I see the future being, is that I see the future being that people are going to break out of those norms and learn how to be a little bit more resourceful. Like, I think that there's, in this time where it's seeming like everybody just has to put their business online and on Zoom, that there's actually other ways that once we get creative and start to think outside of the box, that there will be all different innovations and ideas, right?
Well, and this is often what stimulates those types of innovations. And I love some of the topics you talked on there. I mean, 100 years ago, and it's interesting how the cycle worked. In the last 20s, we had the Great Depression, right?
Yeah.
But imagine the differences. What they were going through, people are like, oh, it could be the same type of thing. It won't be. Even if financially we're in ruin, even if in other ways we're in ruin, one key thing you hit on, we still have the internet. We are connected to the knowledge of the world at our fingertips. I know people that are learning brand new skills right now because, yeah, maybe the business they were doing is just not possible right now, and they don't want to wait for it to resolve. So they're learning a new skill because they have to support their family, right?
Yeah.
Cool. We can do that. One of the first things that happened when all of this self-isolation spread across the globe is all the world's leading universities, from MIT to Harvard to Yale, put all of their curriculum online for free for anyone. Holy smokes.
Right.
Do you know how expensive that education is normally? And yet they're giving it away for free because, like you, like me, like some other people, they see that now more than ever is the opportunity, support, and elevation of everybody, that we need to become more educated if we are going to push forward, right? And so I love all of these things we're talking about. You and I obviously could talk all day about stuff, but what I'd like to remind our attendees of is this is not the Kristen Marcus Hour. If you have questions, type them away.
Yeah, I've been seeing the chat box going off, but I haven't looked.
In the chat box, and I'll be happy to unmute you so that you can talk to Kristen or myself. Like, this is a conversation for everyone. We all can benefit from this. So right now I see Karen from Love You Be You, and she makes pedicure and manicure kits for people at home, which is pretty cool because, yeah, we got to take care of ourselves a bit, right?
Yeah, Smart Serve. Yeah, that's free. I saw that the other day. That's pretty cool. Hopefully one day we can use it. But
Well, even using it at home is not a bad thing. I mean,
right.
some
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
want to learn how to mix their drinks. Actually, on that particular note, if that's the kind of thing that interests you, I do recommend going and hoarding your alcohol, because Alberta has shut down all alcohol sales, meaning
That concerns me.
yeah. Well, for many reasons, because that's
Yeah.
how, like, we were in some chats on Facebook about this. It's kind of how you placate the masses and prevent violence, right? It's how you keep people subdued, and a little bit of alcoholism as an escape right now is probably a lot better than taking to the streets with violence.
You know what? It's not even that too. It's it could cause people to go into withdrawal, and withdrawal will have people go to the hospital. And do we need more people in the hospital right now? That's the big problem that I see, right? Like, and that's why they've kept it as an essential service in my mind, looking at it from an addiction standpoint. You take that away, then like what happens to our healthcare system, right?
That totally makes sense. Another taboo topic that was more of a humorous thing, as I was thinking about Sheldon Isaac posting about it's been 2.5 weeks, is everyone pregnant yet? And when they announced that this self-isolation will probably go on for 9 to 12 months, my first thought was, cool, right as we're coming out of this pandemic and relieving the stress on the hospitals, 100,000 pregnant women are going to walk in ready to pop. It's like, you just can't win, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just one of those things. I was waiting for some people to groan and text. No one did, so hooray. What I'd like to do, though, is I don't want to prolong the conversations. I want to honor your time and our time. I actually have my next meeting at 1 o'clock, and I know you most likely have some other things to do. So what I want to do, Kristen, is just provide you an opportunity, of course, to be raw, to be real, to present some practical woo, and really just what would you like to say to anyone that watches this video, to anyone that's listening now? What is the most impactful, meaningful thing? Not a golden nugget or any of that kind of stuff. That's too woo-woo. What practical, honest, no-nonsense thing can you tell people right now that you think would be of benefit?
So the biggest thing for me that I've been telling people is the whole identifying your emotions. Meet yourself where you're at. A lot, the feedback I've been hearing from people is that they feel this pressure, like this pressure that they should be, thriving in their business, thriving in homeschooling their kids, and taking that old busy life and trying to, put it in this little box of this computer world that we're living in. Sorry if there was noise, my dog's making noise over here. You didn't hear her? No. Okay. But just meeting yourself where you're at, stopping and pausing and saying, okay, how am I feeling right now? And then noticing, okay, I'm feeling fairly calm right now. Next step, if you're, doing the dishes and you're starting to feel angry, what emotion am I feeling right now? I'm feeling anger. And then what I invite people to do is move through that. So for me, anger is best released through running.
No? Did you freeze up, or is that on my end? Not sure. That could be the universe. Oh, you see her frozen. Okay. That could be the universe telling us it's time to go. So unfortunately, Kristen, you're going to have to watch this later to hear me say, thank you. I love you. I appreciate you for the influence you've had on my life and for those all around us. Please, let's be real. Let me know how I can serve you through these times. I'm willing to do so. Everyone here on this chat knows me. They know that's true. And I open it up to any of you as well. I'm more than happy to serve you in any way I can. I do agree with what Kristen's saying. Allow yourself to be human. Allow yourself to feel and work through it. She's saying for her, it's running. For me, it's right now, it's push-ups, push-ups, push-ups until I fall to the floor. But test it. Test everything, right? Figure out what works for you, because what works for you might not be the same as what works for your spouse, your family, for your friends, for anyone else that you meet. So figure out what works for you. Jackie, Marla, for those commenting, Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. Definitely stay healthy and safe. And Marla, I'm so grateful that you came on this call. I was really excited to have some time with Kristen as well, because we always do have the best conversations. Karen, absolutely adore you. Love that you're contributing as well to the community around us. So thank you, everyone. There'll probably be some links. Kristen was going to stay around after because there was a couple of things we wanted to share, like that grief chart with you. So when her and I reconnect, I will make sure that we get those resources for you. So until then, stay home, stay safe, and stay sane.